I knew Thanksgiving was supposed to be the one day of the year when families came together, pretended everything was fine, and passed around mashed potatoes like we were all starring in some perfect holiday commercial. But that morning, before anyone even arrived, I already felt that familiar tightness in my chest, the feeling I always got before walking into a room where I never truly belonged. And deep down, I think I knew something was going to go wrong. I just didn't know how far the night would go, or how much it would change my life. My brother, Marcus, had always been the loud one, the bold one, the one everyone expected great things from. Growing up, he didn't just walk into a room, he filled it, owned it, shaped it around himself. And me? I was the quiet middle child, the one who blended into the edges. I wasn't shy, just overlooked. If he was the sun, I was the small shadow following behind him, too faint for anyone to point at. And for years I told myself that was fine. But that Thanksgiving dinner was different. The energy felt heavier, like everyone had arrived carrying their own quiet storms behind their smiles. My mom kept fussing over the turkey even though it was already done. My dad was unusually silent, sitting in his favorite chair with a tired look in his eyes. And Marcus, he walked in late, grinning like he'd just won a prize, wearing a new watch he absolutely wanted everyone to notice. He hugged my parents, complimented the table setup, made a joke about traffic, and barely gave me more than a glance. Honestly, I didn't expect more. I had learned to accept my place in this unspoken family hierarchy. But Marcus had always been competitive with me, even when there was nothing to compete about. If I bought a car, he bought a nicer one. If I got a new job, he'd compare salaries before saying, "Congrats." If anyone complimented me, he'd twist it into something small or lucky. But I never reacted. I never gave him the satisfaction. And maybe that annoyed him more than anything. Dinner started normally enough. We passed dishes around, exchanged small talk, laughed a little. I actually let myself relax for a moment, thinking maybe this year will be quiet. Maybe the peace will last. But of course I should have known better. It happened halfway through the meal, right after my mom asked how everyone's year had been. Marcus immediately jumped in like he'd been waiting for that exact question. He talked about his promotion, his new apartment, his big plans. Everyone clapped politely. My parents beamed with pride. Then my mom turned to me, smiling warmly, and asked, "And what about you, sweetheart? Anything new?" Before I could get out a single word, Marcus laughed under his breath, loud enough for the whole table to hear. "New?" he said, shaking his head. "Come on, Mom. What could possibly be new with them?" The room went quiet, that uncomfortable kind of quiet where you can hear every fork and glass settle on the table. I took a slow breath, trying to stay calm. My mom frowned. "Marcus, don't start." He shrugged, flashing that smug smile he wore whenever he felt brave with an audience. "I'm just saying the truth. Every family has one overachiever, and every family has one failure. And we all know which one they are." He nodded toward me, bold, direct, confident. The words hit me harder than I expected. Not because they were true, but because he said them in front of everyone. Because he wanted to humiliate me. Because he thought he had the right. For a moment, I felt myself shrinking inside, disappearing the way I always did. But something in me shifted. Maybe it was the way my dad looked away instead of defending me. Maybe it was the way Marcus leaned back like he just scored some kind of victory. Maybe it was just years of swallowing insults finally settling in my throat and refusing to go down. So instead of arguing, instead of crying, instead of letting him win, I smiled. A calm, steady, unnerving kind of smile. And for the first time, Marcus looked unsure. "So," he said, his voice slightly less confident, "you gonna deny it?" I didn't say a single word. I just kept smiling at him, the way someone might smile when they know a secret no one else at the table is aware of. A secret that changes everything. My mom reached over and touched my hand, worried. "Honey, you don't have to respond to that." But I still didn't speak. I kept my eyes on Marcus. And slowly the smile made him fidget. He shifted in his chair. He cleared his throat. He looked away. Then back at me. Something about my silence unsettled him, as if the power he tried to hold over me had suddenly cracked right in his hands. The truth was, I did have something new in my life. Something bigger than a promotion or an apartment or a shiny watch. Something I wasn't planning to reveal, not yet, not tonight. But seeing the way Marcus puffed himself up, seeing how much he needed me to be beneath him, made me realize that maybe keeping quiet wasn't protecting me anymore. Maybe it was only protecting his ego. But I wasn't ready to explain it. Not in front of everyone. Not in that moment. So instead, I let my smile do the talking. And for the first time in our entire lives, Marcus didn't know how to respond to me. He opened his mouth like he wanted to say something else, maybe another insult, maybe a joke to lighten the tension. But then he closed it. He looked confused, nervous, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years: control. "You okay?" he asked finally, trying to laugh it off. I just kept smiling. And something in his eyes flickered. Fear, confusion, maybe recognition. He knew something was different. He just didn't know what. Not yet. Because the truth, the one thing he would never expect, the thing that would flip our entire family dynamic upside down, was still waiting to be revealed. And when he found out, when everyone found out, Marcus would realize something he never could have imagined. The person he called the family failure was about to become the one person he depended on the most. And the part he really wouldn't see coming? The part one still hadn't spoken aloud? Was that by the time this story finished unfolding, Marcus wouldn't just regret what he said. He'd need me. He'd rely on me. And in a way he never saw coming, he'd become mine. After dinner, everyone drifted into the living room the way families usually do after a long day. My mom brought out pie, my dad pretended to watch football even though he kept glancing at everyone like he was monitoring the temperature in the room, and Marcus paced around with his phone in his hand, pretending to scroll but checking on me every few seconds. That smile I gave him at the dinner table was still bothering him, even though hours had passed. He didn't know what it meant. And that uncertainty was eating at him more than any insult ever could have eaten at me. I stayed quiet, sitting on the couch near the window where the cold air seeped through the frame. The house smelled like cinnamon and roasted turkey, like every holiday memory we'd ever had. But the atmosphere wasn't warm anymore. Something invisible was hanging over all of us. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one shrinking under it. The tension was sitting on Marcus for once, and I could see him cracking under the weight. He finally walked over to me and lowered his voice, like he didn't want anyone else to hear. "What's your problem?" he asked, but not in that usual sharp way he used. It was softer this time, almost unsure. I didn't answer. I simply looked at him again with that same calm smile. And his jaw tightened. "You're acting weird," he muttered. "Just say whatever you want to say." But that was the thing. I didn't want to say anything, yet. Because the truth I'd been holding on to wasn't something you just announce casually at a holiday dinner. It was heavier, bigger, something that required the right moment. And I wasn't going to give him the power to control when that moment came. He stared at me for a few more seconds before sighing and walking away, but even from across the room I could feel his eyes on me. He was restless, uncomfortable, and it was only going to get worse. As I sat there, I thought back over the past year, the year he assumed I had nothing new. The year he believed I had nothing going on, nothing moving, nothing changing. But that was because I never told him anything. I never shared my plans, my work, my choices, or the unexpected opportunities that came my way. Not because I wanted to hide them out of spite. I hid them because I learned, slowly, painfully, that every time I opened a door to something good in my life, Marcus tried to close it. There was the time I got accepted into a training program, and he told my parents it wasn't serious enough. There was the time I saved up to start a small business plan, and he told me it was a bad idea before I even explained what it was. There was the job I once loved, the one I worked hard for, the one I kept quiet about until the day it became official, and when he found out, he treated it like a competition he somehow still needed to win. So eventually, I stopped telling him anything. I built my life quietly, brick by brick, piece by piece, in a way he couldn't interrupt or overshadow. And somewhere along the way, something big came along, something unexpected, something life-changing. Something that shifted the entire balance of our family without any of them knowing. But of course, Marcus didn't notice. He was too busy shining to see that my shadow had shape now. That it wasn't small anymore. That it could stand on its own. Later that night, after the pie had been served and everyone was resting in that sleepy post-dinner haze, my dad called me into the hallway. He didn't say why. He just nodded toward the spare room and walked in. I followed him quietly. He closed the door behind us and I noticed the serious look on his face. The kind he only used when something important was being discussed. "Your brother crossed the line," he said gently. "I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner." I shrugged. "I'm used to it." "You shouldn't be," he said. "That's not something anyone should be used to." We stood in silence for a moment. The hum of the heater filled the space between us. My dad looked like he wanted to say more but didn't know how. "You've been different this year," he finally said. Calmer. More focused. "We've noticed." I swallowed. "Is that a bad thing?" "No," he said, shaking his head. "It's just, I think your brother noticed too. He just doesn't understand what it means." Neither did they, not really. No one understood yet. But they would soon. My dad waited like he expected me to explain, but I stayed quiet. It wasn't time. When I came out of the room, Marcus was waiting in the hallway, pretending he just happened to be passing by. He raised an eyebrow. What was that about? I brushed past him without answering. Again, the silence bothered him more than any confrontation. He followed me into the living room. Look, he said, lowering his voice again, if this is about earlier, I was joking. You're too sensitive. I looked at him, and for the first time I didn't feel hurt. I felt aware. Aware of who he was. Who he had always been. And how little his words meant now that my path had shifted. I'm fine, I said softly. He didn't believe me. I could tell by the way he kept staring, analyzing me like he was trying to solve a puzzle that had missing pieces. The night ended with awkward goodbyes and forced smiles. My parents hugged me a little tighter than usual. Marcus stood behind them watching me, waiting for some answer he wasn't going to get. When I finally stepped outside, the cold air hit my face sharper than expected. The sky was quiet, dark, full of tiny stars that looked like distant reminders of things bigger than family drama. I walked to my car slowly, my breath visible in the air. As I unlocked the door, I heard footsteps behind me. Marcus again. You're hiding something, he said quietly, not in an angry way but almost afraid. I didn't look back. Everyone hides something. But you're hiding something big, he whispered. Something that has to do with me, right? His voice wavered. And that's when I realized, deep down, he wasn't afraid of me. He was afraid of losing the version of me he had always relied on. The version he could control, overshadow, mock, and still expect support from whenever he needed it. But that version of me was gone. And he could feel it. I opened my car door, still not facing him. Good night, Marcus. Before he could respond, I got inside and closed the door. His reflection in the window looked small, uncertain, almost lost. For the first time in our lives, he wasn't the powerful one in the moment. I drove away slowly, the road empty and quiet, but the tension wasn't gone. It was only shifting, building, preparing itself for what came next. Because soon, very soon, Marcus would learn the truth. About me. About the changes he never saw coming. About the new position that tied our lives together in a way he never expected. The truth that would explain the smile I gave him at the table, and the fear he saw in his own reflection afterward. But he wasn't ready yet. And what he didn't know was that the moment he learned everything, nothing in our family would ever be the same again. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual, even though I barely slept. My phone buzzed on the nightstand with a few messages from my mom checking in, one voice note from her saying she hoped I wasn't upset after Thanksgiving, and then, of course, a text from Marcus. He didn't say good morning. He didn't apologize. He just wrote, "We need to talk." I ignored it at first. Not out of spite, but because I knew exactly why he wanted to talk. He wasn't sorry about calling me the family failure. He wasn't trying to fix anything. He just wanted answers, the kind that would help him regain his sense of control. And I wasn't ready to hand that back to him. I got out of bed and made coffee, trying to quiet the mix of emotions swirling inside me. It wasn't anger, not exactly. It was something heavier, something that felt like the weight of an entire year finally settling into place. The truth about what I had been doing, the responsibilities I had taken on, the new path I stepped into. It wasn't something I could explain in a single conversation. It wasn't something I wanted to explain while he was still in the mindset that he had the right to belittle me. I sat at the small kitchen table and stared out the window at the gray morning sky. It looked like the world was holding its breath. And maybe I was too. By afternoon, Marcus called me. I let it ring. Then he called again. And again. By the fifth call, he left a voicemail. His voice sounded rough, frustrated, but underneath it, I could hear something else, a hint of panic. Look, if this is about what I said last night, just call me back. Please. Please. That wasn't a word he used often. But I didn't call him. Something in me wanted him to sit with the discomfort, the same way I had sat with his comments for years. Not to hurt him, but to shift the balance that had always leaned in his favor. For once, he needed something from me and he had no idea how to handle it. I spent the day cleaning, organizing, doing anything that distracted me. But everything reminded me of the changes he didn't know about yet. Papers in the drawer, letters from the lawyer, documents with my name on them where his should have been, opportunities that aligned with my future while pushing his aside. Things that happened quietly, one step at a time, until suddenly, everything connected. By evening, I finally left the apartment and drove to the grocery store to pick up a few things. I didn't expect to see Marcus there. He walked in just as I was grabbing a basket. For a moment, we just stared at each other. He walked over slowly, looking unsure. That alone was strange. Marcus never looked unsure. "You've been ignoring me," he said, not accusing this time but almost hurt. I've been busy, I replied. He let out a dry laugh. Busy now? Or busy this whole year you kept secrets? I froze slightly. He didn't know what the secrets were, but he knew they existed now. He could feel them around him, tightening like invisible walls he couldn't see through. And that scared him. What do you want, Marcus? I asked quietly. He hesitated before answering. I want to know what's going on. You didn't ask me that before. He swallowed hard. Because before I thought I knew everything. That sentence told me more about him than anything he'd ever said out loud. He didn't just want control, he depended on it. He needed to be the one who people relied on, listened to, admired. And the idea that I was living a life outside of his expectations, it unsettled him in ways he didn't know how to hide. We stood between the aisles as people walked around us, pushing carts, grabbing snacks, and continuing their normal lives. But we were frozen in a moment neither of us knew how to step out of. You can talk to me, he said. It almost sounded like a plea. But trust wasn't something you rebuilt in a grocery store. I will, I said softly. But not yet. He nodded slowly, but his eyes were full of questions he couldn't ask, maybe because he wasn't ready for the answers. Maybe because part of him knew the truth would shift everything he relied on. As I turned to walk away, his voice followed me. Is it something bad? No. Something about the family? In a way. The uncertainty on his face deepened. He hated not knowing. He hated being left out of anything that affected him, especially if it came from me, the person he always assumed would stay in his shadow. I finished shopping quickly, and when I left the store, I found him leaning on his car, staring at the pavement like he was trying to solve a puzzle without all the pieces. I'm scared, he admitted quietly when he saw me. Hearing those words from Marcus felt almost unreal. The confident brother, the center of attention, the one our parents pointed to when they talked about success. Scared? What are you scared of? I whispered. That you're planning something that will change everything, he said. And I'm the last one to know. He wasn't wrong. But he didn't understand the deeper truth, not yet. The change wasn't something I planned against him. It was something life placed in my hands when I least expected it. Something that involved responsibility, decisions, and consequences none of us had prepared for. I didn't answer his question. Instead, I got into my car and watched him through the window again, his posture stiff, his expression tight, his confidence cracked around the edges. When I drove off, he didn't move. He stayed standing there, staring at the empty space where my car had been, like he was trying to stop everything from shifting around him. That night, I sat in my living room with the lights off, the documents spread out on the coffee table in front of me. The truth was staring back at me, heavy and undeniable. It wasn't just a secret. It wasn't just an opportunity. It was a responsibility, one that connected directly to Marcus whether he wanted it or not. A responsibility that would change the power dynamic in our family. A responsibility that tied his future to decisions I never thought I'd have the authority to make. A responsibility I didn't ask for, but one I couldn't walk away from now. The conflict between us wasn't about sibling rivalry anymore. It was about what was coming next. Something none of us were ready for. And as I looked at his name written on those papers, under mine, I understood exactly why he felt afraid. Because soon, very soon, he would understand everything. And when he did, he wouldn't be calling me the family failure anymore. For the next few days, the silence between Marcus and me felt heavier than any argument we had ever had. He tried reaching out a few more times, each message shorter and more uncertain than the last, but I kept my distance. Not to punish him, but because I needed space to understand how everything was unfolding. The documents on my table weren't just papers. They were proof of how much my life had changed without anyone noticing. And the closer I got to revealing the truth, the more the tension grew between us like a storm waiting to break. By the fourth day, my mom called me again, her voice filled with worry. She told me Marcus had shown up at the house twice, pacing, asking if I'd said anything to them. She said he looked stressed, distracted, like someone walking around with invisible weight pulling his shoulders down. He's not sleeping, she whispered. I can tell. And he keeps asking if he did something wrong. I almost laughed at that. My brother, the self-proclaimed perfect one, asking if he did something wrong. But this situation had pushed him into unfamiliar territory. He wasn't used to being in the dark. He wasn't used to me having any kind of power. And now, with everything shifting, he felt the ground moving under him. That night, as I sat staring at the documents again, my phone buzzed with another message. But this time, it wasn't from Marcus. It was from the lawyer. A reminder about our meeting. The meeting where everything would be finalized. where the decision that connected both our futures would become official, where my role, and Marcus's new reality, would be set in stone. My heart thumped in my chest as I read the message again. It didn't matter how prepared I thought I was. The moment was becoming real. And I knew Marcus would lose his mind if he found out by accident. He needed to hear it from me. But the time wasn't right yet. The next day I went back to work trying to keep things normal. But even there, it felt like the world was buzzing around me, like everything was building up to a moment I couldn't avoid. My coworkers chatted about weekend plans, the holidays, bonuses, promotions, but my mind was somewhere else entirely. During my break, I stepped outside, letting the cold air clear my thoughts. I hadn't even taken a full breath when I heard someone call my name from behind. I turned around and saw Marcus walking toward me. His hair was a little messy, his eyes tired, and he looked like he hadn't gotten a full night's sleep since Thanksgiving. He stopped a few feet away, breathing hard as if chasing me across the parking lot had drained him. "You're avoiding me," he said, his voice low. I didn't deny it. He stepped closer. "I can't do this anymore. Just tell me what's going on. Please." There was that word again, please. Hearing it from him didn't feel satisfying like people might expect. It felt sad. Like he was slowly realizing the world didn't bend the way he thought it did. I looked at him carefully, studying the cracks in his confidence. "It's not time yet. So there is something." His voice shook. "Something big." "Yes." He ran a hand over his face, exhaling hard. "Does it affect me?" I stayed silent. His breath caught. "Does it affect the family?" Still nothing. And in my silence, he found the answer he had been dreading. His expression changed in a way I'd never seen before. Fear, confusion, and something like guilt tangling together. "What did I do?" he whispered. "What did I do that was so bad you couldn't tell me anything?" It would have been easy to blame him, but this wasn't about blame. It was about the truth finally finding its moment. "You'll know soon," I said quietly. I started to walk past him, but he reached out, not grabbing, not pulling, just touching my sleeve like he was afraid I'd disappear if he didn't. "Am I losing something?" he asked. "Or, am I losing you?" The question hit me harder than I expected. For a moment, I almost told him everything. I almost opened the entire story right there in the cold parking lot. But the truth needed the right place, the right time, the right frame. It wasn't something to rush. It was something to deliver with clarity. "You're not losing me," I finally said. "But things are going to change." His eyes searched mine, desperate for a timeline, an explanation, anything that could keep him from spiraling. "When?" he asked, barely above a whisper. "Soon." He closed his eyes like the word physically hurt. I walked away again, and this time he didn't follow. He stayed standing in that same spot, staring at his feet, shoulders tense, looking like someone who had lost more in a week than he had in his entire life. That night, the lawyer emailed the final version of the documents. My hands shook as I opened them. At the top, in bold letters, were our names, mine first, then his. The responsibility was officially mine now. The control shifted. The power dynamic flipped. And Marcus had no idea how deep it went. 2 days later, the tension finally reached the point where it felt like the entire world was leaning in, waiting for the moment everything would collide. My parents invited me over for a small family dinner. Nothing fancy, just something to bring everyone back together after the holiday chaos. I knew Marcus would be there. I knew he'd be watching my every move. And I knew I couldn't avoid what was coming any longer. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw his car already parked outside, the lights off, the windows slightly fogged from the cold. It looked like he had been sitting in there for a while. I stepped out into the quiet evening air, and for a moment, everything felt still. Marcus stepped out of his car at the same time. Our eyes locked across the driveway. He didn't smirk. He didn't mock. He didn't act superior. He looked serious, nervous, uncertain. Like a man standing inches from a truth he wasn't ready for. "Is tonight the night?" he asked softly. My heartbeat echoed in my ears. "Maybe," I said. He swallowed hard, nodding slowly, bracing himself as if for impact. Then he spoke again, quiet, trembling, raw. "Whatever it is, just don't blindside me." I didn't answer. I walked toward the house. He followed. And each step we took brought us closer to the moment everything would change, forever. The truth was waiting behind that front door. And once it came out, there would be no going back. As I reached for the doorknob, Marcus stopped just behind me. I could hear his shaky breathing, like he was preparing for something he couldn't see but could feel closing in around him. The house was quiet on the other side, too quiet for a family dinner. Normally by now my mom would be bustling around the kitchen, my dad would be adjusting the thermostat, and music would be playing low in the background. But tonight there was only silence. I pushed the door open slowly. The living room lights were off except for a single lamp near the couch. My mom was sitting at the edge of the seat, hands clasped together, eyes wide with worry the second she saw us. My dad stood near the dining table, pacing, which he only did when something serious was going on. Before I could ask anything, my mom stood up quickly and rushed toward us. "Thank God you're here," she said, her voice trembling. "We just got news, something important." I froze. Marcus stiffened behind me. My mom took a shaky breath. "Your uncle called. He's sending over final notes about the estate." Something new came up. The estate. Even hearing the word made my stomach tighten. That's what all the documents on my table were about. That's what I had been preparing for. That was the responsibility that had landed in my lap so unexpectedly. But this wasn't supposed to be happening tonight. My dad stopped pacing, looking straight at me. "He said he needs to talk to you. Urgently." To me. Only me. Marcus inhaled sharply, as if that single detail cut deeper than anything else. "Why you?" he whispered under his breath. But I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because inside my chest, something shifted, like a door opening to a second twist I hadn't seen coming. My dad motioned toward the dining table. A folder lay there, thick, sealed, with my name written on the top. Not Marcus's. Not both of ours. Just mine. I walked over slowly, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. Marcus followed so closely behind me that I could feel his uncertainty pressing against my back. My mom and dad didn't speak. They just watched, almost afraid of what was inside that folder. When I finally opened it, the air in the room felt heavier. Inside, there weren't the same papers I already had at home. These were new. Different. Darker. A second, unexpected layer of the truth. There were financial records, letters, handwritten notes from my late uncle, and, sitting on top, a document marked with 2 urgent red stamps. Marcus stepped closer, trying to read over my shoulder. "What is that?" he asked, voice quivering. I didn't answer at first. I couldn't. My eyes scanned the lines, the numbers, the details, and every second I read, the bigger the twist became. My parents exchanged anxious looks until my dad finally spoke. "Your uncle made changes we didn't know about." I felt my throat tighten. "Changes? When?" "Right before he passed," my mom whispered. "He didn't want the whole family involved, just you." Marcus's breath hitched. "Just them?" he repeated, louder this time. My mom nodded slowly. And that's when the second twist hit. Art. This wasn't just about inheritance. This was about control. Responsibility. Authority. My uncle hadn't just added my name. He had removed someone else's. My brother's. It was written in cold, clear lines. Marcus's name crossed out. Mine, circled, highlighted, underlined. The air between us cracked like glass. Marcus took a stumbling step back, staring at the papers as if they were a weapon pointed straight at him. He cut me out? His voice broke. I didn't know what to say. I didn't even know how to breathe. But that wasn't all. Because as I flipped through the pages, I found a letter tucked inside, addressed directly to me. My hands shook as I pulled it out. My uncle's handwriting filled the page. I read the first line silently. Then the second. By the third, my heart dropped. He knew. He knew what Marcus had been doing behind the scenes, things none of us had known about. Not cruel, violent things, but financial mistakes, hidden debts, poor decisions that he had kept secret to protect his own image as the successful one in the family. He had been sinking quietly, slowly, behind the shine of his reputation. And my uncle had discovered everything months before he passed. The letter detailed it all, explaining why the responsibility had been moved entirely to me, because I was steady, quiet, careful. Because I didn't need attention to make a decision. Because I wasn't driven by pride. Because I could handle what Marcus couldn't. My stomach twisted. The weight of the entire situation compressed at once. This wasn't just a shift of power. This was an avalanche. Marcus saw my face draining of color. What? He demanded, voice sharp with rising fear. What's in the letter? I folded it quickly before he could grab it. I asked you something, he snapped. Marcus. My dad's voice cut in. Sit down. No. Marcus shot back, panic leaking through his tone. You all know something I don't. It's about me, isn't it? Nobody spoke. The silence told him everything. His jaw clenched, trembling as if he were holding on to the last thread holding him together. What did he write about me? My fingers tightened around the letter. Tell me, he shouted, stepping forward. My mom flinched. My dad stepped between us instinctively. Marcus, he said firmly. This isn't the moment. Marcus breathed hard, almost shaking now. He looked between all of us, my parents, the documents, the letter in my hand, and the fear in his eyes twisted into something else. A realization. A devastating one. He wasn't just losing control. He had already lost it. He stepped back, voice softer, broken. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't think. He swallowed hard, unable to finish. We all waited, but he didn't say more. The room was thick with tension, thicker than anything that had ever existed between us before. The stakes weren't just high, they were exploding outward, spilling into every part of our family. The inheritance, the responsibility, the truth about his mistakes, the shift in power, the letter. Everything was reaching the breaking point. Marcus stared at me with a mix of shock, betrayal, and something deeper, fear he couldn't hide anymore. You're not telling me everything, he whispered. There's more. I can feel it. There was much more. And the next thing that would come out, the part the lawyer hadn't even told me yet, would twist the entire story into something even larger. Something that would pull every secret into the light. Something that would force the final confrontation none of us were ready for. The second twist was only the beginning, and the real explosion was still waiting to come. When I stepped back inside the house, I could feel the air shift, almost as if the walls themselves sensed that something big was about to happen. My brother Marcus was pacing the living room with that same restless energy he always had when he knew he was close to losing control. He glanced at me, then quickly looked away, like he didn't want to admit he'd been waiting for my next move. It was strange, after years of him calling me the family failure, suddenly he seemed nervous, almost unsettled, like he could feel the ground under him shaking. My mother and father sat quietly at the dining table, both pretending to scroll their phones, but their stiff shoulders made it clear they were listening to every sound. No one said a word, but the room felt tight, like all the years of unspoken tension had been packed into a box and someone had just snapped the lid open. Marcus finally stopped pacing. We're not done talking, he said, his voice lower this time, not as sharp as before. You can't just walk away when things get uncomfortable. I almost laughed because uncomfortable was the only thing I'd ever been around him. I didn't walk away, I said. I just needed air. That's allowed, right? He rubbed his forehead like he was fighting a headache. Look, don't make this harder. Just tell me what you want. That was new. Marcus never asked what I wanted. He was the type who assumed he already knew everyone's thoughts, that his version of the world was the right one. Hearing him ask felt strange, almost out of place. And yet something in his posture told me he wasn't doing it out of kindness. He was doing it because he felt cornered. I want honesty, I said quietly. For once. He let out a deep, frustrated exhale. Fine. Then you need to hear this. Everything I said at Thanksgiving, you think it was because I wanted to hurt you? You think I did it just to embarrass you? Did you not? I asked. His eyes flickered, guilt, annoyance, something mixed. No. I did it because I was scared. Scared? That word didn't fit him. Marcus was the one who told me fear was weakness. He was the golden child, the one everyone bragged about, the one who made every success I had seem small. But now he was admitting fear? It didn't make sense. And yet, the longer I looked at him, the more I saw it. The tight jaw, the nervous tapping of his fingers, the way he avoided steady eye contact. What were you scared of? I asked. He swallowed hard. You. The room went silent. Even my parents stopped pretending not to listen. My heartbeat slowed, confused. I had spent my entire life shrinking myself around him, and now he stood there telling me he had been afraid of me? That makes no sense, I said. You've never given me any reason to believe that. Because I couldn't let you see it, he said. You were always the one who kept going. Even when things broke you, even when everyone doubted you, you still kept trying. I didn't want to admit that you had something I didn't. His voice softened in a way I had never heard before. It wasn't smooth or controlled, it cracked slightly like the truth was forcing its way out. But something still felt off. Something was missing. And then, before I could reply, my mother stood. Marcus, stop. You need to tell the whole truth. He turned to her sharply. Mom? No, she said, her tone firmer than I expected. You started this. Finish it. He looked cornered again, trapped between something he didn't want to say and something he couldn't hide anymore. He pressed his palms together and stared at the floor. I wasn't scared of you failing, he said. I was scared of you proving everyone wrong. Because if you did, then all the pressure they put on me would finally mean nothing. The truth landed like a weight on my chest. So that was it. The constant comparison, the criticism, the little jabs that chipped away at me, None of it was because I was weak. It was because he feared losing the one thing he clung to, being the successful sibling. But before I could respond, he dropped the real twist. "And there's more," he said quietly. "Dad was planning to hand the business to you, not me." My father looked down, embarrassed, confirming it without a word. I froze. "What?" Marcus nodded slowly. "Yeah. He told me 2 months ago. Said you had the right temperament and he thought you'd be better long-term. That's why I said what I said at Thanksgiving." I snapped. I felt everything slipping. My parents exchanged worried glances, but no one interrupted. "So all this time," I said slowly, "you weren't angry because I failed. You were angry because you thought I might succeed." He shut his eyes. "Yes." The confession shook me. It explained everything. His behavior, his outbursts, his need to push me down so he didn't have to face his own insecurities. But even as the truth settled in, something in his expression made me pause. He looked almost relieved, like finally saying it freed him from a burden. For a moment, the tension in the room softened, until he spoke again. "But don't get it twisted," he added, and the sharpness returned to his voice. "Just because Dad thought you could take over doesn't mean I'm stepping aside. I'm not going to let you just walk in and take everything." There was another shift. The honesty was real, but the fight was still there. Marcus didn't surrender. He never had. "I never wanted to take anything from you," I said. "I just wanted space to live my own life." He shook his head. "It doesn't matter now. The decision's already been made. The board votes tomorrow. And if you show up, everything changes." My heart skipped. "What board? What vote?" He smirked slightly, like he regretted saying too much. "Doesn't matter. You'll find out." I stepped closer. "Marcus, what did you do?" He didn't look away this time. His stare was cold, sharp, almost daring me to push further. "Let's just say, you're not the only one who can surprise people." My mother gasped softly. My father's face went pale. "What did you do?" I repeated. He finally spoke, voice low, steady, and terrifyingly calm. "If you walk into that meeting tomorrow, the family failure won't be me anymore." A chill ran through me. In one sentence he confirmed everything. This wasn't over. Not even close. He still had a plan. And whatever it was, he believed it would destroy me completely. And then, just as I opened my mouth to ask what he meant, someone knocked at the door. A firm, loud, unexpected knock. Everyone froze. Marcus's face drained of color. He whispered almost to himself, "Not now, not today." I turned toward him slowly. "Who's at the door, Marcus?" But he didn't answer. His silence was the final twist I never saw coming. And I knew, whatever was about to happen would change everything. The knocking grew louder, echoing through the hallway like whoever was outside had no intention of leaving. Each knock hit harder than the last, vibrating the quiet that had swallowed the room. My heart raced, not because I expected danger but because of the way Marcus reacted. His eyes kept shifting toward the front door, then back at me as if he was calculating something he no longer had time to hide. My father stood first, his chair scraping the floor. "I'll answer," he said, trying to sound calm, but his voice shook just enough for all of us to notice. He walked toward the door slowly, like he was bracing for something none of us had been told. Marcus didn't move. He just stood there with his arms stiff at his sides, breathing through his nose like he was preparing for impact. My mother touched his arm gently, but he pulled away without looking at her. That was when I realized, this wasn't just another family argument. Whatever was coming, Marcus had been trying to outrun it. The door opened. A tall man in a simple jacket stepped into view. He wasn't threatening, not aggressive, not someone who looked like trouble. But the badge hanging from his front pocket made the room tilt for a second. Not a police badge, something corporate, something official. He looked past my father and directly at Marcus. "Mr. Bennett?" he asked. Marcus froze. "Yes. I'm here regarding the documents you submitted last week," the man said. "We've been trying to reach you. We need one final confirmation before tomorrow's board vote." My father closed his eyes like he already knew what this meant. I stepped forward. "Documents for what?" The man hesitated, unsure if he should respond, but my father nodded at him, silently giving permission. He cleared his throat. "Mr. Bennett filed a formal request to remove you from eligibility for the upcoming leadership transition." The air left my chest. My mother gasped softly, like she'd been hit with cold water. "Marcus, you didn't?" He didn't answer. He kept his stare locked on the floor, jaw tight, refusing to look at any of us. The man continued, "We can finalize everything, but we need your signature tonight." Without it, the request will be void. He held out a clipboard. My father stepped aside and looked at Marcus. You tried to block your own sibling from having a chance. After everything? Marcus finally looked up at me. His expression wasn't angry or smug or triumphant. It was exhausted. There was fear in it, yes, but also defeat, like he knew this moment was coming. I thought it was the only way, he whispered. I didn't want to lose everything. I didn't want you walking in and taking what I've worked for. You don't even want the business. I never wanted to take anything from you, I said, my voice softer than I expected. I just wanted respect. And a chance to live without being treated like a mistake. He swallowed hard, his throat tightening. I didn't know how to handle that. I noticed, I said. The man stepped forward again. Sir, I do need an answer. My mother sighed, wiping the corner of her eye. Marcus, look at what this is doing to us. Look at what it's doing to you. He didn't respond. My father spoke next, his voice steady but disappointed. You can sign it if this is really who you want to be, or you can let go and stop fighting shadows in your own mind. Marcus looked between all of us, the clipboard trembling in his hand. He was sweating, breathing unevenly. For someone who always carried himself with certainty, he suddenly looked small. Human even. I took a slow step toward him. You don't have to keep seeing me as competition. I'm not your enemy. My words hit him harder than I expected. His face cracked, not in anger but in something deeper, something that looked like regret. His voice finally broke when he spoke. I don't know how to stop comparing myself, he whispered. You always acted like you were losing, but you had something I didn't. You had the freedom to fail and start over. I never had that. Everyone expected greatness from me before I even knew who I was. His shoulders trembled slightly, and for the first time in our lives he wasn't pretending. I'm tired, he said. I'm so tired of pretending I'm okay. Hearing that hurt more than anything he'd ever said to me. I gently pushed the clipboard back toward the man. Give him a moment. He won't be signing that today. Marcus looked up, startled. Why are you? Because this isn't how our story ends, I said. Not with more damage. The man waited for my father's signal. My father nodded firmly. We'll contact you tomorrow, he told the man. The man thanked him, stepped back outside and closed the door quietly behind him. The moment it clicked shut, every tension in the house seemed to melt at once. Not completely, but enough for all of us to breathe again. Marcus sank into a chair, pressing his palms against his face. My mother wrapped her arm around his back and he didn't pull away. My father stood tall, watching all of us like he was trying to piece together the family he'd almost lost. I sat beside Marcus. He didn't look at me. I'm sorry, he said quietly. For Thanksgiving. For everything. I nodded slowly. Thank you. We didn't hug. We didn't make dramatic promises. But something shifted, something real. It felt like we finally stopped fighting the wrong battles. The rest of the night passed softly. We talked, carefully at first, then more openly. No yelling. No blame games. Just honesty. Raw, uncomfortable, necessary honesty. By the time the house grew quiet again, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not perfect peace. But enough. The next morning, I went with my father to the board meeting. Not to take over the business, not to fight for a position, but to set things straight. I made it clear I wasn't there to replace Marcus. I wanted him to have the job he'd worked for, the job he feared losing. The board respected that. But the real change happened when Marcus walked in unexpectedly. He looked calmer, almost humbled. And when he sat beside me instead of across from me, the entire room shifted. He spoke clearly, admitting he had acted out of fear, not ambition. And in the end, the board supported him, but with new guardrails, new expectations, and new accountability. After the meeting, he walked out beside me. I'm still figuring myself out, he said. But I want to try. Not to beat you. Just to be better. I smiled. That's all I ever wanted. The sunlight hit us as we stepped outside, warm and gentle, and for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like a spotlight or a shadow. Just a simple new beginning. We weren't perfect. We weren't fully healed. But we had taken the first step. And sometimes that's enough.